I heard a story about a city once. It was a very troubled city. Anxiety and depression were on the rise, as were violence and addiction. People were out of touch with nature, and they spent their days doing things they didn't like so that they could continue to do things they didn't like. It's a very sad state of affairs. There was a young man living in that city, and he spent his childhood as so many of us do. He learned what was valued and what wasn't valued, what was appropriate and what wasn't appropriate, how to be nice and kind and good. And he took all of these beliefs and all of these things that he absorbed from around him, and he created an image in his mind of what the perfect man would look like. And he spent his days trying to fulfill that image. It was exhausting. It's difficult to act every day, but to the boy it wasn't even an act, for he had done it so long that he no longer knew who he was. And then one day, this life that he had worked so hard for, this 10 of diamonds life, you might call it, well, it started to fall apart. And in his despair and hopelessness, he went around to anyone who might be able to help him put his life back together. But so often, decisions that are made out of despair are not the best and only serve to make things worse. Then one night, he found himself walking through the city. It was approaching dusk, and the street lights were just flickering on. And he found himself in that strange road that separates the city from the forest. Oh, that's right. I didn't tell you about the forest. You see, there was a forest on the edge of this city, and so often a green space so close to a large population like that would be turned into a park. But not this one. There were no paths in the forest. It was completely and utterly wild. People didn't venture in there so often. They had tried to chart it out and map it when they first built the city, but they found the next day when they went back in, their maps were no longer good, as if the terrain was continuously changing. The people who did go into that forest, well, people said they weren't right in the head. They were nuts, had some screws loose off their rockers. They went in saying that they could hear something, that they could hear us singing, but no one else could hear it, only them. And when they came back out, if they managed to, they did so speaking of soul and vision. People called them dreamers. They didn't fit in so well. That's not what the elders say, or the few that are left anyway. They say it was once a necessity to the life of every man and woman to venture into that woods. They said each person who was born in that city was born connected to a tree in the forest. And at a moment in their life, they would hear the singing coming from that tree in the wood. And if they went in there, found the cave down in amongst the roots of the tree, and entered it, in that darkness, they would find the vision of their own life. They would find the memory of why they are here. And when they returned to the city, they did so with the threads of their own life held firmly in their hands. And that vision brought reimagination and healing to the city. It was like the lifeblood of the city. Those old ways have been forgotten. But they say that they're starting to see more and more people walking that road that separates the city from the forest. More and more people out there on the edge. And a young man found himself walking up this street. He was looking down at the remains of his life in his hands. And he bumped into someone or something, and it fell to the ground. And he bent down to pick it up, And he said sorry without even lifting his head. Then he went to move, but what or whom he had bumped into was still there. And he expected to find the person angry for him, for not watching where he was going, for not looking. But he looked into the eyes of an old man. The old man had a look of compassion and understanding. The young boy took him in for a moment. He saw that he wore a newspaper boy-style hat. He had a long brown coat that went down almost to his knees. In his hand, he had a suitcase. And on that suitcase, there were stickers from all over the world, places the boy couldn't even imagine going. They were so far distant from the Florida vacation, the Mexico beach. There were places like Indonesia and Peru and Thailand, Japan. And on that briefcase, there was also a sticker. And the sticker was that of a magician's hat, a rabbit, a wand, and rings. On the man's feet were a pair of boots. They were aged and well-worn leather. The soles were almost worn clean through. The young boy gravitated back to the suitcase and back to that sticker of the hat and the bunny and the rings. He asked the old man if he was a magician. The old man nodded and said he was, feeling as though he had asked everyone else. He decided that he'd ask the magician. He said, "Can you put my life back together?" He took the pieces and looked them over. He said that he could do that, but that there was only one problem. The moment that the boy walked away, it would only begin to fall apart again. And when the young man asked him why, the old man said, "Because the image inside is far more beautiful than the one we portray. And that which is not the truth only seeks to fall away." Young man, well, he was almost irritated by this. He wasn't in the mood for a riddle. He wasn't in the mood to be made fun of, and the old man could see this. He wanted to help, but sometimes riddles and poems are the easiest way to say the hard things. But he thought he had another way. He reached inside his coat pocket, withdrew a deck of cards. Now, the young man, he didn't see what use a deck of cards could be at a moment like this. The old magician, almost as if he knew what he was thinking, said, "Didn't you know? There's magic in the most ordinary of things." "Ah, a jack for a jack," said the old magician. Now, this caught Jack off guard, for he had never told the old magician his name, although he did feel that maybe he knew him from somewhere. All this was quite standard, just like any card trick one had ever seen. Card was selected and then lost. But that's when the old magician, he did something quite different. He took the two packs and mashed the decks face up into face down. "Chaos," he said. And he showed Jack the condition of the pack. The cards facing upwards and downwards and back to back and face to face. He said, "I want you to do something for me, Jack. I want you to take this packet of cards and place them up against your chest over your heart." Jack took the pack from the old magician and he placed them over his chest. The old magician looked him dead in the eyes. Normally, when someone looked into his eyes like this, Jack would look away. He wouldn't want someone else to see him this clearly. But he knew that the magician could see all the way down into the depths of his despair, into the absolute pits of his hopelessness. He felt comfortable with the old man. He felt safe with him. The old man, still staring at him, said this. He said, "Jack, I want you to know something. I want you to know that all of the struggles and all of the conflict and chaos that you face in your life today only seeks to bring you closer to who you are and why you are here." With that, the old magician took the pack back from Jack. He showed him each and every card had straightened, each and every card except for one, the Jack of Hearts. Now Jack, he couldn't believe it. He didn't know what to say. He was filled with a sensation inside his body like he hadn't experienced since he was young. He felt it somewhere as a child looking at the moon or walking beneath the big trees in the park. He felt it when he looked out at the ocean and saw the crashing waves. This moment of deep wonder and amazement and possibility. A reality that wasn't so solid, wasn't so firm, but was fluid and flexible and full of potential. The old magician, he saw this change in Jack's eyes. He saw the change in Jack's body. He knew that he understood. Jack looked down, for in his hand he was still clutching the 10 of diamonds. He was still clutching the remains of his life. And he reached out and let it go. And just then, Jack started to hear something. It was very gentle at first, but then it grew. It was singing. It was enchanting. It was beautiful. He knew it was coming from the forest. He nodded and smiled at the old man, and turned and walked across the street. The old magician watched Jack disappear beneath the limbs into the darkness. He said a prayer for Jack. He said a prayer to the goddess of memory, that Jack may find his tree, have the courage to enter that cave, and remember the vision of his life and why he's here, and that he may return one day with that vision to the world and bring healing and vitality to the city with so many others, all weaving together to bring beautiful reimagination and recreation that the city so desperately needed. I look out at the world and I think about that story. Think about that story of the city in the woods. And I can't help but think that so many cities now are that city. So many towns now are that city. So many people are dealing with these places and situations and things where their lives fall apart overnight, that their plan falls apart or what they thought was their plan. We can see it as devastating and we can see it as life-destroying. Or we can see it as an opportunity. That maybe it's happened for a reason, that maybe it isn't trying to end our life so much as it is trying to redirect it. I think if we go in that direction of being redirected, and trying to find something, and that search will lead us to answers. I want to thank you for taking the time to be with me here today, for listening to this story. Stay open to possibilities, for our world is a magical place.